Hello and welcome to Bharatshakti.in. We've already had a session on the use of firepower in the Ukrainian war. Our guest then was General P.R. Shankar. We'll carry on with the same subject. This is the part two of the coverage of firepower usage in the Ukrainian war. And again, my guest will be General Shankar. Thank you so much, General, for having joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me over once again. It was an interesting conversation in part one. I'm sure it'll be equally interesting in this part. Please shoot.
No, I'm sure it'll be interesting with you as the guest. It's got to be interesting. I can find no better man than you to be really delivering whatever I
Thanks,
want
sir.
you to
Honored.
talk about. Uh, Right. Jill, we've talked about certain major issues in our first part of this particular discussion on the subject. We talked about firepower and maneuver elements, and we talked about how the importance of firepower is growing further and further, and perhaps maneuver is a function which can be undertaken only if you have had success with firepower. Now, that's possibly what we came at. We also talked about what are the resources that were there with Zelensky when the war started, and how resources were inducted into the theater of war by various NATO countries and also the Americans, and how did it affect the battle, and what made it easier for the Ukrainians, perhaps like you had pointed out so interestingly last time, is since they have been operating on American equipment, they were conversant with American equipment, they're conversant also with the American way of working, that they were able to integrate this equipment together. Now, I'll take you a step further. And one critical issue about this artillery battles that we're talking about is the availability of ammunition, is the variety of ammunition that you have. There is a lot of talk in town, I would say, of various countries approaching those countries which are manufacturing ammunition of the right kind for the Ukrainians, for the American equipment or the NATO equipment, for more ammunition for them. Because as far as the NATO is concerned, it doesn't want to get into its reserves, eat up its reserves while giving them to Ukrainians. Similarly, the Americans also have a problem. So, what's the status really, and how is this? How important is this business of ammunition management in an artillery battlefield?
I think the importance of ammunition management as a whole has come up very much in this battle. No one, these days, no one expects wars to last so long. And this war has lasted already a year, which means almost everyone's ammunition is on the verge of finishing. They've had to restart their production lines, their manufacturing capacity, their gem capacities, and start scrounging from all over. None of the nations which are supporting Ukraine, they're prepared to, dip into their own reserves and actual operational stocks, so they could get to, do whatever. In fact, I think Ukraine, some ammunition was given to Ukraine even from Pakistan, the 122 mm ammunition, because they also had this Chinese 122 mms, and 122 mm is a common caliber across Soviet countries and Chinese countries. I mean, countries which have that equipment of their origin.
I think we
So
still have some 122s
yeah, no. So we are all. I think we've done with all that,
done away with them.
right? And we hardly had any left. Very little ammunition left, and very little guns also left. But interestingly, ammunition management has come to the fore, and it's very important for us, especially in our context. We need to have. See, the problem is you can't have ammunition stocked for 1 year. It's a hell of a costly thing. And what if wars don't happen? If wars don't happen, what do you do with the ammunition? After some time, the shelf life is over and it's done, right? So I mean, we have this concept of 30 I, and 30 days all India reserve, which is quite a bit. But what we need to learn from this is that, look, is this 30 days well placed in the country, so that in a particular sector where more ammunition is needed, you can put in there? That's one. Do you have the rolling stock available? Do you have the manpower available? Do you have the thing available? Yeah, within the units and formations, they have their first line, second line, and third line transport. But what about behind that, at the national logistics level? Is there a requirement for a national logistics load? Because logistics is in battle, you'll agree with me, 80% is artillery ammunition. Then what about missile
Absolutely.
ammunition? What about rocket ammunition? Do you have handling capacities? Do you have storage capacities? Do you have the roads and tracks to take it ahead? And then do you have you know, further in the factories, do you have the capacity to produce so many? Right? How do you forecast that you need so much ammunition? Now, this is all a tricky game, and it needs deep thought and deep pockets. I don't think even
Right.
China, with all its belligerence, has everything worked out. Right? Even Russia at one point of time felt that they didn't have adequate ammunition, but I think they have a huge defense industrial complex which has risen up to their requirement. And one more thing where Russia has survived is because they use a lot of the old ammunition from the old guns, which was anyway going to seed. We didn't need it, right? Whereas that facility was not with the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians had to really are still on the beg, borrow, and scrounge mode. Whereas Russia seems to have a lot of ammunition, and I'm sure by now they would have got their production lines going. So I think this is a very
Uh,
important lesson. Ammunition management, as you rightly said. If you don't have ammunition, that barrel is a piece of cold tube. That's about all, steel tube, nothing. So,
So the 2 points that come out really from your discussion, and I'd like to dwell upon them a little bit, and then ask you for your comments on it. One is, it appears, it's very apparent, in fact, that you need a surge capability during the wartime. You need a surge capability, and the second point is, and that's also based on certain inputs that's coming in the open media, is that the industry in the NATO countries or in the United States, they're not ready to invest so much for production of ammunition straight away, like is the requirement now, because they say that they need orders for a long time booking of their products. Only then can they profitably put their money in. So Russians possibly have an advantage, like you again touched upon it, that most of the ammunition, etc., is in government factories, government establishments, so they can possibly push it through. But to push the industry through, you have to make it a profitable bargain for them. Your comment.
yeah, I think, see, so they are in a situation, okay, but for me, the more important thing is what do we do in our situation, which you rightly said. So we need to work out, do we have a surge capacity? Yes. We have to build it in. We have a surge capacity. The point is, do we assess it well and put it up well? That's the first question. The second thing is, luckily for us, most of our ammunition comes from artillery ammunition, whether it's 155 ammunition or rockets or Pinaka or BrahMos. Everything comes from Indian factories, government-owned factories. So to that extent, you're safe. But as we say Atmanirbharta and you get private players, and we'll have that problem. The private player will not set up a line unless he has assured orders. Assured orders are very minimal during peacetime because that the assured orders can only cater for your training activity, right? I mean, just to give you a broad idea, very broad idea, what I remember the figures. Broadly, Indian Army expends about 2 to 3 lakhs of rounds across the pan India for training in a year. In a year, and that's what you regularly buy. But if you're going to look at operational stocks, it could be upward of 40-50 lakhs. I mean, I don't remember the figures. It could be upward of that, right? And now we're also going into mediumization. That means you're getting more 155s in and less of 105s and all that. 122s anyway, you ease them out. So your factory lines have to change. Now, factory lines changing is not one thing. It is the shell, it's the TNT which goes into the shell, the fuses, and the propellants, and the charge bags, the whole works. So it's not one little thing, and you have a whole packet to think of. And I think it's something which our government has to really sit and work on.
Right. Like you said, the surge capacity has to be is actually the answer, that you should be able to find an answer to how to get the surge capacity going. Well, thank you so much. Very lucid, I would say, explanation of the whole issue. I'll get on to the next issue, which I think should be an important issue both for professionals as also for enthusiasts, artillery enthusiasts. I'm talking about. Well, you know, the, there is a change in role, perhaps, which is evolving as we read the Ukraine battle, as we have read battles before this. You could possibly say even the Kargil battle. And this change in role, if you recall the old role when we were possibly youngsters in the army, was neutralization, then it went to destruction. Has it gone beyond to become something to create an economic problem? It's the economy of the opponent and destroy it. How is the role evolving really?
See, so the artillery today is the main architect or the main subset. I won't say subset. It's the main set of your non-conventional conventional deterrence, non-contact conventional deterrence. When you want to do non-contact warfare in depth, it is artillery. Okay, when you look at for example, your Pralay missile has been inducted. Now Pralay with 500 kilometers range can cross Pakistan. So against Pakistan, you can have a concept of deterrence by punishment. That you punish him in case he does anything funny. You deter him from doing anything funny by assured punishment. Whereas against China, what you could do is you can deter China from any adventure by denial. When you say denial, you should have the capability to interdict PLA forces either during the induction phase or in the offensive phase suitably, so that his whole offensive is derailed. So that means you come into a concept of non-contact warfare, depth battle. You're looking at synergy with the air force, right? And then you're looking at something called deterrence, which is the I think the new role for artillery. Now, when you look at new role for artillery and deterrence, looking at informatization of the battlefield and intelligentization of the battlefield. And these two terms I'm borrowing from the Chinese vocabulary. They've amalgamated space, they've amalgamated sensors, they've amalgamated everything, they've amalgamated networking, they've amalgamated surveillance, and they put into something called the Recce surveillance complex. And then you're looking at something different altogether. So the role of artillery has changed. Now, if the role of artillery has changed, and if the concepts are changing, and as General Naramne, recently in one conference or something, he said there's a reverse linearity. That means battle could start in the rear, not in the front, and there'll be simultaneity of application of fire. If all this is there, and this artillery and air force are going to be the main actors in this whole story. I mean, it's very. I'd like to point it out. Air force is a service for the same task you do. You're not even a combat. You're not even a general cadre. You're a support arm. Artillery for the same task of deterrence, interdiction, all what I've said. The air force and the artillery have to be in synergy with each other. They replace each other. If the air can't fly, the missiles reach there. If for some reason you don't have missiles, you send the air in. So both these are really high value and combat arms. So if that is so, the entire concept of general cadre needs to change. I think we are outdated completely.
Right, General, thank you so much. Very lucid. And I will want to dwell upon this general cadre issue a little more. Firstly, let me
Yeah,
explain
please.
it for the viewer. No, okay, for the viewer, let me explain it. That the general cadre is the one which commands the divisions, the corps, the infantry brigades down there, and also goes to become army commander and the chief. Now, infantry, mechanized infantry, and armor are part of the general cadre as such. I think aviation is also part of it. But as far as the artillery is concerned, which is actually shaping the battlefield, like the general has said, and which is actually the preeminent for applicable force, application of force in the battlefield, whether it's in depth or whether it's right with our troops in contact for their battle, it is artillery. So, isn't there a requirement, General Shankar, of ensuring that artillery officers automatically go into general cadre and not have this system that we are having of 6 to 7 or 8 vacancies for artillery in general cadre, and you waste out the rest when major application of forces primarily the firepower aspect.
Yeah, I think so. So there's a strong case. In fact, I think we are outdated. Look, for Russia, artillery is their god of war. Okay.
Stalin said
Uh,
so.
yeah, and there's a main combat arm. The entire army is built around their artillery. Even in Pakistan, I think either the CIGS, their chief of command general staff is an artillery officer. For them also, artillery is a combat arm. So is the case for everyone else. Why is it not for us? Why are artillery officers treated as support services, or they have to go through a special dispensation to get into general cadre? It's beyond me, right? As you modernize artillery, and if artillery is your main stage actor, you can't keep him as a side player. So you have to get artillery officers to think this entire business through.
Right. Thank you, General. I think that was very well delivered. I have one last question for you, and quick, crisp answers from you is what I would request. Uh, Lessons learned from this battle, Ukraine battle, that are applicable for us also, like certain things you have already brought out. Anything else that you would like to put across?
So first lesson is, I think we have to relook at artillery completely. The role of artillery in the battlefield and the role of our operations, how we're going to carry out operations. There is talk of this already. We are also looking at something called a rocket force. You know, if you have a rocket force separately and artillery separately, how are these going to grow? That's something which conceptually we have to be right. If you're not right conceptually, the whole story will go for the toss. The next thing is integration of all elements, the firepower and the sensors, sensor shooter, you know, um, integration, which is very important. The sensor shooter linkages have to be strong and integral and organic to each other, right? And you need to have a recce surveillance complex given the fact that your ranges are extending. For example, today you have Pinaka, which fires up to 80 kilometers. Tomorrow, if you put a ramjet onto it, it will go up to 250 kilometers. From the same platform, you have multiple ranges which are available. So you need different varieties of things. Then you need support systems for the like MET. You need MET over longer distances. Then you need very important ammunition management. Now, ammunition management has to be at the local level and at the national level. So all these things are important when you now look at the way this entire battle has been fought and the way artillery is going to be employed in the future battlefield. Then, of course, you have the next major lesson is how do you integrate air power with artillery ground-based firepower? So you need a lot of jointness to come in, which brings me to the next question: what about theaterization? Is there a case for theaterization? Because to a large extent, I think Russia faltered in not having theaterization and jointness to the degree it was required. So all these things are there in the mix for us to learn from this.
Right. Thank you, General. I think we will wind up on that note, and thank you so much for a very, very lucid talk. I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, sir.
And thank you, viewers. Thanks for joining us. And I hope you've enjoyed the discussion. We'll continue with more on Ukraine in the next couple of days. We'll possibly have one on the air power and one more on some other issue that all of us will find relevant. And do watch us, do like us, and do let us know any subjects that you want us to deal with. Thank you.